All right, good evening. Welcome to the work session for the Village of Pleasantville Board of Trustees. Today is Monday, the 27th of June, our last meeting in the month of June. First item on our agenda, welcome to you, Sir Brandon Jacobs.
Hey, Brandon.
Hey, everybody.
Here to talk about Blink charging, electric vehicle charging stations.
Yeah, and I'll set the table for you, Brandon, a bit. As the board knows, we're proposing to put two dual port level 2 charging stations in Memorial Plaza, so on what we'll call the northern median. So it'll take 4 total spaces, so 2 machines with 2 ports on each one. We've been talking to 2 companies, one that's on state contract and then Blink, which is on Sourcewell. Done some due diligence, talked to some residents here. One, Jonathan Ailes, who was actually the head of New York City's electrical fleet. Got some feedback from him, and we're moving towards going with Blink. And Brandon is vice president of Blink and also a village resident. So that works out well for us. And right now, what we need to determine, well, there's a kind of layers to this, but first and foremost, thinking about whether we want to purchase this equipment outright and pay for the electricity, the equipment itself, or as Brandon has proposed, and we're working together, this hybrid lease arrangement, which he can go into more detail about. And then the second layer to all of this is talking about the regulations around the EV charging stations, and we can get into that a little bit further as we talk to Brandon. But things like whether or not we want to charge for the actual parking space, which is probably not what we want to do because Con Ed is proposing a rebate, which we would not qualify for if we were to charge for parking spaces. But we can get into that detail a little bit more. But Brandon, did you want to kind of go into detail about Blink and the proposed lease arrangement?
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Eric. So I have a presentation I can share.
Okay.
Can you guys see that?
Yes, we can.
Yep.
Okay. So yeah, this is an overview of Blink, and I'll touch into what I think you guys will care most about. So just quickly about Blink, we have offices in 7 countries now, and we have chargers in 18 countries and growing. We just acquired a company called SemiConnect, who was like the same size as us, so we essentially doubled in size overnight. We will now have U.S. manufacturing of our chargers. We are headquartered in Miami. We have a production facility in Tempe, Arizona. I am based right here in Pleasantville, so I'm uniquely interested in getting these chargers installed. I'm very excited about it as a town resident. Some other companies we've worked with, as you can see in the bottom right, some other municipalities that we are working with throughout the country. Product overview. What we are proposing that the village installs is this IQ200 right in the middle here. This is a level 2 charger. Each plug is capable of outputting up to 80 amps of 208 or 240 volt power, and is the fastest level 2 charger on the market. So they call them destination chargers where people are already going to their destination and charging while they're getting a bite to eat or walking around town, whatever it might be. That's where these chargers are a fit, and that's what we are proposing. Just a quick look at other chargers that we have in our product portfolio. The top left, the HQ200 is for single family homes. MQ200 is for multifamily apartment complexes. We have a portable charger for roadside assistance companies. On the right, we have the DC fast charging for like highway stops. And then the Vision IQ is like a retail play with an added element of the advertising screen. Mm-hmm. So I want to dive more on this level 2 charger because that's the one you will be receiving. So Eric and I have been talking about the details with the power specifics. And what we're going to be doing is feeding each one of these dual port chargers with a 100 amp circuit, which means that if one of the plugs is in use, it'll pull the full 80 amps, which will maximize the charging speed. And if they're both in use, it'll split it evenly. So each of those dual ports will have that 100 amp circuit. They can be mounted onto a wall or pole, but we're doing a pedestal and right behind the parking space. So it'll be outfitting in between two parking spaces. Payment methods: drivers can pay via the Blink card or the Blink app. And soon they'll be able to use Apple Pay, Google Wallet right on the charger. That'll be ready in the next couple months. And then if they don't have any of that, they can call a phone number that's listed on the charger and give their credit card over the phone. So the chargers are powered by the Blink network. Some providers out there only sell hardware, some only sell software. We do both the hardware and the software. So we are vertically integrated in that sense. The drivers will use the network to pay for the charge. Blink will collect revenue via the app, via the software, and distribute your share of the revenue via that way. So you'll be able to log on the network and monitor the chargers, see how many kilowatt hours are being used, how that converts to CO2 reduction, oil barrel saved, all the ESG metrics that you need. So it's a very in-depth network that is aligned with the chargers. All right, so the business models. So I'm going to skip to this chart. The two that we are considering with the village is the one all on the left, the host-owned, and then the hybrid-owned, second from the right. So with host-owned, it's straightforward sale, essentially. You buy the chargers, you install them, you can set the price to whatever you want, and you keep 100% of the revenue that the chargers generate. So we're not keeping any of the revenue. That is all yours. You own it, you maintain it, it is your property. The hybrid owned, which it sounds like the village might be leaning towards, is where Blink will actually maintain ownership of the charger. So we will give you the chargers at no cost, and you pay for the installation, which you already have done. I was telling Eric, you guys have done the hard part already, which is running the power to the site. That can take months typically, so it's awesome to hear that you have already done that. And so the cost of running power, you've already paid for. So the hybrid owned, because you've already paid for that, then we would give you up to 40% of the revenue share and reimburse you for the electricity cost. So we are giving you the charger for free, and we're maintaining ownership of the hardware. And again, we're giving you 40% of the rev share plus electricity reimbursement. And Blink is fully responsible for all service and maintenance for the life of the charger in that scenario. It is our hardware. We are fully responsible for making sure it's up and running at all times. So you won't have to worry about that. And it's typically a 7-year contract, but Eric and I have talked about reducing the length in exchange for a different charging revenue share. So we can discuss that. Any questions on the specifics of the two different models that we were considering?
Yeah, I had one question. If someone were to run into the device, run into the machine, and we don't know who it is, and it's damaged, under the hybrid-owned model, what would happen next?
Yeah, if the one thing that's not covered under the standard maintenance is vandalism. So if someone came and took a bath to the chargers, then the village would be on the hook to help with the repairs. But anything outside of that, like any warranty issues, is fully covered by Blink.
Okay.
So car bumping into it falls into the vandalism category?
Yeah, but we have talked about putting up dollars, but it sounds like it might not be necessary because they'll be, the way that it's situated is they're going to be a few feet back away from the parking spot. And Eric can speak to that a little bit more, but we had addressed the idea of putting bollards up, but we were told it would not be necessary.
So will they be in the median, you think, Eric?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
And Jeff would build up the curb, so.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So-
Yep.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask, well, under the ownership structure, if we owned it and paid a maintenance and repair contract, would that type of damage fall under the maintenance and repair?
Yeah, so the way that we describe it is, so they come with a 1-year warranty, which covers our both parts and labor, and you have the option of buying an extended warranty of a 3 or a 5-year plan. So that would essentially be the service and maintenance. If there's ever an issue, we would come service it if it's under warranty.
And what do you imagine is the lifespan of these devices, either because they wear out or because the technology changes?
They are designed for 10,000 charging cycles, which will last at least 10 years.
And is it imaginable that the technology will change in some significant way in that time period?
So not really, because these were designed to be future-proof in the sense that, if you look at the National Electrical Code, the most that you're legally allowed to put on a level 2 charger, it's called J1772 plug, is 100 amps. And that's what we are doing. We are maxing out that requirement. And it's a bit ahead of its time because most cars on the road can't accept the full 100 amps. So we're kind of prepping for like the next wave of EVs that are coming online that will have these bigger batteries. And because we are an owner operator of chargers, we are incentivized to build in future proofing to our chargers. Whereas if we were just selling hardware, we might be incentivized to build in obsolescence to sell you a new machine in a couple of years. But because we are owners of it, we are on the hook if chargers, the technology gets dated. So we want them in the ground as long as possible. And that's why this technology was designed to address both the current need but also the next wave of EVs that are coming online. So we don't anticipate a newer technology, but if something were to happen and we own the charger, then we will swap it out with a new charger.
Okay.
Could I ask another,
Yeah.
just a weather-related question? Has this device, the particular one that we would be using, has it been around long enough to know how it holds up to extreme weather conditions, like a very icy, snowy winter with a lot of freeze and melt, or on the contrary, a very hot stretch in the summer? Do you know enough about it yet?
Yep. So they're fully outdoor rated. We have these chargers installed in like northern Canada. And also down in South America. They're designed to withstand temperatures of negative 40 degrees Fahrenheit and positive 140 degrees.
That ought to do it, right?
It can handle all that.
Quick question.
This is David
Sorry,
Vinjamori, board member who's joined virtually.
Yeah, I apologize to everyone. I was in DC this morning. I'm flying to Alaska in about 8 hours, so I'm just joining virtually. So if we choose the hybrid option, and unlike the purchase option where we determine the price of electricity, do you have a formula? How do we sort of protect our villagers in terms of the relationship between the cost and the price of electricity?
Yep. So that would be part of the contract negotiations, is determining what that price is.
Okay.
We have standard rates in New York, but we are open to talking about what makes sense. We want to put a number on the chargers that will incentivize as much usage as possible. So we're aligned on that.
And does that price, is that highly variable, or is it a fixed price for some period of time?
It's not variable. We set it and don't change it unless there's an explicit reason to do so.
Even
and
in the
charged
current,
per kilowatt hour, so similar to like per gallon when filling up your car.
Yeah.
You're paying for the kilowatt hours that you're using.
so how have you managed that in the current environment when electricity rates have spiked?
We haven't seen them spike too much compared to like what you're seeing like with gas prices.
Yeah.
So we set our price and then we will reimburse you for the electricity cost. So
Understood.
you'll send us a bill. I'll request you send us a bill, and I'll see what you're paying per kilowatt hour, and then I enter that amount into my system and reimburse you for all the kilowatt hours that I use on my charger, and then set a price higher than that on the charger, and then the revenue is divvied up per the agreement.
Understood.
So I was curious about the cost of equipment, and You had said that we wouldn't qualify for a Con Ed grant, but I was wondering, my understanding is that there are grants available through the Department of Environmental Conservation. Is that something that we've explored?
Well, so we do qualify for Con Ed rebate, so they're gonna
Okay.
provide us rebate 75% of the cost of running the electricity out to the stations. And we're in line for that if we agree not to charge for the parking spaces. When I say charge, not having them pay the meter to park there. They pay for the electricity,
They pay for the electricity.
but not the meter. But yeah, we would be. There are certainly grants out there that could help fund the acquisition of the equipment.
And can we establish a time limit on the parking and still qualify? In
Yes.
other words, somebody can't park there for 10 days.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to look through the details of the grant program, but somebody from our climate smart group suggested that it could pay for up to 80% of the equipment.
Yep, certainly. And Brendan, how much are these units going for?
So the MSRP for each dual port charger is $7,000, and if you buy via Sourcewell, you get an 18% discount. So I think it's like $5,700.
And so I think of consideration is really not so much the cost of the equipment itself, but really the exposure when it comes to the electrical costs, given the environment we're in right now. So,
I see.
Based on
Well,
the
and
usage,
further the maintenance issue, right?
Yeah,
Maintenance, yeah.
So we have an attendee who had his hand up in Sarabin. Ben, did you want to say something?
I'm sure he does.
You there, Ben?
I mean, I guess I guess there were the things that I want to touch upon. I mean, Ben Sarabin, resident, so thank you for this. But I guess my question just I don't see the equipment failing. So I guess that's not my concern. I guess my focus is more on the parking, just changing some of the parking ordinances to allow for longer term parking, overnight parking, and just changing the cost structure where if someone's charging, that they're not in essence limited to 1 hour or 2 hour. That's really my focus on this.
Well, so at the moment in Memorial Plaza, that side of Memorial Plaza, and we could revisit this about these spots, but it's currently permit only until 10 a.m. And then anyone can park there essentially as long as they want, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And overnight, anyone is welcome to park there as long as they want, except they can't be there on a Saturday morning because of the farm market.
right,
Right.
but not in this particular part of the lot.
So, at any rate, I think that's flexible enough, is it not, Ben?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's fine. I quickly looked up link pricing for electricity and it seemed very high. So I just want to make sure that it's just a percentage. If you guys go hybrid owned or host owned, you just figure out what percentage over cost electricity is, just to incentivize the usage of this.
And what would you say about that, Brandon?
What I was saying earlier, we are just as incentivized as everyone else is to set a price that will allow the chargers to be used as much as possible. If we set it too high and we're pricing ourselves out of the market, then it will be a good investment for us. We're investing thousands of dollars in these hardwares because we know this is a good location. And if you guys own it, the wholesale model, then you're free to set the price to whatever you want. So it's only if it's the hybrid model where we have to have a discussion on what price that needs to be.
And in terms of, we would pass a local law to amend our parking code to allow for extended use of the spaces, or
Right.
craft in whatever manner we want to, and working with the village.
So,
attorney.
Brandon, with these devices and the average electric car, if someone arrived at this charger relatively short of power, how long would they need to be there in order to top off, after which they're blocking space for somebody else?
I would say on average, around 2 hours. But they can get up to 60 miles of charge for every hour that they're charging.
So if somebody in an electric car is a commuter, for example,
Yep.
they arrive in the morning, they plug in the car, they're not back until night, they're blocking the thing and won't be using any electricity essentially after, say, 2 hours, right?
So once their battery is fully charged, then yes, it'll shut off the electricity and they won't be pulling electricity anymore.
And so what does that do to your business model if we had people who had the habit of doing that, who are parked at this charger potentially for 10 hours a day, but really only need 2 hours to charge?
Yeah, I mean it's good and bad. I mean it's like a high floor because you're having a consistent person charging every day or most days, but it's a low ceiling because you're not turning that charger like you would turn a table in a restaurant. So it's cost of doing business. It's okay.
Okay.
But we would encourage them to not do that if possible. But we understand with commuters that's hard to avoid.
Now,
Yep.
Brennan, is there the opportunity to implement an occupancy fee for someone who would stay on the charger after being fully charged?
There is. So you have the option of charging what's called an occupancy fee, which is the fee that will kick in after the car is fully charged but still plugged in. So it might be tricky because with the commuters, they're not able to move their cars, but for other instances, what typically happens is a driver will be done charging, look at a notification on their phone saying, charging session is done, you have 30 minutes to move your car, and if you don't move your car in 30 minutes, we'll charge you $1 every 30 minutes, whatever it might be. So it's a deterrent to have people just sit and use up the charger all day. But we have to be careful with that because if commuters are using it and they're in the city for 10 hours, they won't be too happy if they're paying those fees every day.
Although am I correct in imagining, our commuters by definition are coming from a very short distance?
Yeah.
And so they would have decided to charge downtown at this charger as opposed to at home, but that would cost them more money than charging at home, right? The price they pay for electricity at their own house is going to be less than the price they pay here?
Yes, but so like I live in Pleasantville. I drive an electric car. I charge at home. But what I do is I use a 110 outlet, which is called a trip charge, which will only give me about 4 miles for every hour to charge. So if I'm empty, it could take me 4 to 5 days to charge full. So if I'll get like 50 miles overnight, whereas I can get 50 miles in an hour at the level 2 charger. So I'll leave my house with quarter to half tank and then top off at the charger in town while I'm at the Pleasantville Diner or whatever it might be.
But you wouldn't,
So-
if you were a commuter, you wouldn't do that every day. You'd do it infrequently, right? If you wanted, right?
Yeah, if I'm taking the train to
Yeah.
work every day, then yes, I would need to do it every single day.
Just trying to avoid a situation where, in essence, we give preferential parking to folks with electric cars, and they plug the gizmo in to fulfill the terms of the deal, which is you're allowed to park here if you are plugged in, but they don't really need it, right?
So maybe an occupancy fee is a way to combat that. I mean, you could set the price whatever you want. You could say $1 for every 2 hours that you're plugged in. So you're charging them for the spot that way. But we can play around with that.
Okay.
And we can also adapt it as we go. I mean, as habits are changing rapidly.
I guess we have to figure out who our target audience is too. Like, is it people who are going to visit Pleasantville with their electric car and we want them to stay here for 2 hours, or is it just?
I mean, Brandon, you're a good example of someone who lives here but who does not have the capacity to fast charge at home.
Correct.
And there must be a lot of people in that situation, right?
Definitely. Yep.
Because it costs quite a bit of money. If you're a renter, you may not have the option. If you're a homeowner, it's still quite a bit of money to upgrade to have the capacity to charge fast, right?
Yeah, I got a quote to install a level 2 charger in my house, and they quoted me a little over $3,000 to do it. So I decided, I'm just going to get a slow charge overnight, and then I'll find public chargers throughout my day when I need it.
Or only drive the car every 5 days.
Yeah, exactly.
So right now we're proposing to put 2 of these in
Yeah, that have 4 ports.
that have 4 ports total.
Yeah,
Okay.
so 4 spaces would be.
And does that correspond with what we have in place in terms of what Jeff installed in
Yes.
terms of the.
Yes.
Okay, so any other questions? I'm preliminarily have to dig into a little further based on what Brandon has reported, but it seems like the hybrid-owned option is logical for us. And did you say, Brandon, that you were at least tentatively open to a shorter contract period?
We are, yes.
Okay.
I mean, I agree. That's how I would lean. The hybrid one.
All right, comments, questions, anybody else?
No, it sounds good.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
thank you, Brandon.
Yeah,
All right,
you.
thank you
Appreciate
all.
it.
Thank
Glad
you.
to think that we're also dealing with a Pleasantville resident in this regard. That wasn't a requirement of the deal, but it's a benefit.
All right, any other questions for me before I sign off?
I think not.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
All
you,
right,
Brandon.
Thank you all for your time.
Bye now.
Bye.
All right. Next up on our agenda is our consultation with Pleasantville for better cell service and Homeland Towers. Michael, you want to set that up?
Sure. So I've been talking over the last several months with Carrie Albaum, who's represents a Facebook group, Pleasantville for Better Cell Service, which is I would like to applaud the simplicity of the name of the group. No one has to guess what you're about. And Carrie has brought to my attention Homeland Towers, a company that's worked with many municipalities in Westchester. And so Vincent is here with us tonight to talk, but I think Carrie's going to say maybe 1 minute of remarks and then hand it over to Vincent for a bit more.
Well, first of all, I learned a lot about chargers. You guys learned a
If
lot.
only we can figure out how to use electric cars as a portable cell.
There you go.
Site.
That might be an idea.
So Carrie, just to be formal, since you're a resident, can you state your name and address for?
Sure. So my name is Carrie. I live at 11 Toyoga Lane here in Pleasantville. And I'm excited to be here, first of all. And I want to thank the mayor and the board and village administrator for letting us come in here and talk today. So I represent Pleasantville for Better Cell Service. We have about 200 members. And our mission is to create high-speed, sustainable cell service in Pleasantville for the safety and betterment of the school district, the community, and businesses. So I am excited here to be here today because I think there's some solutions local in the community that can help us get this mission and conquer this goal. So with that, I have Vincent here from Homeland Towers that's going to discuss some possible solutions.
Thank you, sir. Welcome, Vincent. I have those couple of slides. I can share them with the Zoom audience whenever you tell me to.
Thank you, I'd appreciate it. You can put the first one up now if you like. So for the record, my name is Vincent Xavier, and I'm the regional manager for Homeland Towers. Homeland Towers is a real estate developer that focuses on telecom infrastructure. More than half of the deals and sites we build are generally on municipal property, most recently including the town of Bedford and the town of Mount Pleasant, although we've worked with others, including the town of Newcastle. I'm currently working with the county of Putnam as well. There's several others in this area in Orange, Rockland, Putnam, and Westchester counties. Really, I'm here tonight not really to tell you have a problem, because obviously there's a Facebook group, and just driving around you can see you have a problem with service. I was hoping to start by trying to explain why you have the problem that you do. As you may know, you really only have one cell tower in town, and it's a flagpole style tower. And that's at the very bottom southwest portion of your town. And obviously the town does have a slightly unique shape to it, and trying to provide all coverage from one site is part of the reason you have the problems that you have. The first slide I brought up was really just intended to show the different type of cell sites, because a cell network is not based solely on just large cell towers anymore. Many years ago, when the network was still in its infancy and there wasn't a lot of actually connected devices, you could just have one tower on top of a mountain and shoot for 5 miles in every direction. And within that 5 miles, just throwing a number out there, let's say you have 10,000 devices. Now within that 5 mile radius, you may have 100,000 devices. each carrier puts a certain number of antennas on the towers, and between the antennas and the base station equipment, they can only handle so much inputs at one time. So you can no longer just have one site covering a large geographic area. If you look at the slide, there are several different types. Generally, the big towers are called macro cell sites or macro towers. But in order to build it through layers, you'll see that you need other ones called small cells, and this could be rooftops or smaller towers. Basically, they're just towers that are not positioned at the highest elevation with the highest structure itself. They're more well-positioned sites at a lower height, and that would be what the small cells are. Additionally, you have ODAS or ODAS, which is short for Outside Distributed Antenna System. And that's what's used, as I showed the example here, for stadiums and things like that, where it's a small system where it's just pointing inward and it's only meant to cover a very small geographic area. Then you have IDAS on the middle to the right there on the bottom, which is Indoor Distributed Antenna Systems. And those are to cover generally large corporate buildings. They're in the hallways, they're small nodes, and they only cover several hundred feet in any direction, and they're only intended to cover in building. It's a combination of those layers is how a network is made. The issue, like I just said, you have is that you only have one macro cell site covering the entire area. And what that'll lead to is even if you are outside and you have one or two bars, you may be able to make a phone call, but you're not going to be able to connect through data. And even your call itself is not going to be reliable because you're going to have capacity issues. As I just said, each site can only handle so much at once. And if you're putting all of your community on one site, even if you have what looks like service, it's not going to be reliable service, and it's still not going to work even though your phone thinks you have good connectivity. So the reason I'm here tonight is to see, or to try to work with you to find a way to develop those additional layers within your community by working with the municipality and this board to find the way that the community feels is best aesthetically, that will also meet the needs of the community, the users, and the businesses. If you can go to the next slide for me. So this one looks, very crazy, but I just wanted to bring this up to kind of show you from a network perspective, when I talk about issues with capacity, what the carriers are looking at here. The red dashed line that goes horizontal to the x-axis is the maximum output that a site can hold. And this is real world data from another site I'm working on in northern New York. And it shows the purple being lower band 700 megahertz talk connectivity. And the red is more of the LTE, the higher frequency data connectivity. And this is actual usage showing over a course of a year the spikes in usage. The spikes can be created from when school is on, when you have a specific event in an area, anything else that we could call as high traffic situations. So you'll see that over time there are spikes, and every time there's a spike over that red line, that's the instance I'm referring to where yes, it looks like you have coverage, but the signal itself degrades so much that it's not reliable anymore. And that is part of the problem you're having here. Because of that one site you have, especially being a flagpole, you only have so many antennas pointing in the direction of your community, which means it gets overloaded faster, and it results in spikes greater than this.
So, just to interrupt briefly.
Yeah.
Does that mean that at a given time when the demand is very low, we have great service because we're a small place and we have this high tower? The trouble we encounter is too many people trying to use it at once.
Well, yes and no. Because it's so poorly positioned in relative to the actual usage in your village, yes, when there's very low usage and you're very near the tower, you're going to have great service in that
But we're
area.
only a mile across.
Only very close to the tower, yes.
But the whole town is only a mile across. I mean,
Yeah.
I say that kind of anecdotally, which is to say I think a lot of us have had the same experience
Yeah.
of really pretty satisfactory service for a long time that has degraded substantially in the recent time.
Yeah. Well, it's not so much just the size of the geographic area, it's the terrain and the existing structures in the area. So, because it's not centrally located, it's not going to cover the whole area. And if you were to look inside that flagpole, there's going to be, it's a pole, and there's 3 antennas per carrier. They're snugged up against the pole, pointing in different directions. So if the carriers have 3 antennas pointing, there's only really one pointing in the direction of your community here. And that means it has to get through all of these older stone buildings. And I kind of like to relate it to like a flashlight. You know, if you have a flashlight and a nice LED one that has a focused beam, if you bring your finger close to the flashlight, you're going to have a greater shadow. That shadow is poor cell service. If you're further away, that structure is not going to affect it so much, you're not going to have as great a shadow. But because of where it is and all of the fingers that it has to shoot through, you're still going to be suffering from poor signal coverage, even though your community is only a mile wide.
And what about like 5G technology and these original towers?
Yeah.
With 5G, do you need infrastructure closer to each other?
Well, and that's a great point. The lower Gs are basically lower frequencies, the 700 megahertz band. And they are stronger in the sense that they go further, but they have less capacity. They're not good for data. The 4G, 5Gs are higher frequency. For example, if the lower one is 700, the LTEs are 2100 and above. They're higher frequency. They provide more capacity, but the signal doesn't travel as far. So as these sites get upgraded, you are going to see less and less coverage from them because the frequencies they're using are different now. So yes, as 5G develops, you will need more sites strategically placed in the areas that the additional capacity is needed.
So when you say the 5G has greater capacity but travels a shorter distance, like what are you referring to specifically in terms of capacity? Are you talking about number of users or amount of
Both.
data
Yep, it's the number of users, the latency between when you press a button and when the signal comes back, which is especially important as we get into the Internet of Things where everything's going to be connected, potentially driverless cars. That latency needs to be very low in order for that type of technology to work.
Right.
And just the speed of the downloads themselves. So it's the users, latency, and the speed of the downloads.
Okay.
And so how, I assume the carriers, in an effort to maintain whatever competitive advantage they can create, are looking to provide good service in places where there's revenue.
That's part of it, yes.
Yeah.
Technically, since they have an FCC license to operate in this area, part of that license requires them to provide service to the area within which they are licensed. So
At some minimum level.
yes. So you're right to say that the carriers are incentivized to make sure they have service in the area where there's more revenue. If there's more users, they want to make sure they have coverage there. Otherwise, the users are just going to go to the other carrier that does. So they are incentivized in that sense. The carriers don't necessarily make money specifically from having antennas there. Having a site costs them money.
Right.
Yeah. But yes,
But
they're
AT&T doesn't want to lose to Verizon because Verizon has better coverage in Pleasantville, New York, I assume.
yes.
I mean, not that we alone move the market, but
It helps. People really think, oh, there's no point to complaining. It doesn't do anything. I tell people, and right now I'm working with the school board in my town, the town of Cortland, to try to get them to complain more. Because the carriers only have so much funding that they can allocate each year. Everyone thinks they're just trillion-dollar businesses or something, they spend it. They're very limited as to what they can spend each year. So they're going to spend it where their users are demanding it. So, having people complain, having groups like this form that actually raise the flag will draw them to spend money in your community. Otherwise, they're going to spend it where other people are complaining or where the opportunity exists.
Could I just jump in? It's something that you said, Vincent, in one of our other meetings that was new to me was you said that they have this FCC license. They're going to increase their service anyway in these areas, and if they don't work with municipalities, then they're going to work with private landowners, and then we would have no control or very limited control over what happens, right? And the aesthetic choices, the location choices. So, and if there is some incentive for municipalities to get out in front of it so that there's more control over the siting. Is that correct?
That's 100% correct. And I would actually refer you to the town of Bedford if you want to reach out to Supervisor Calves. They're going through that right now. And a lot of communities do. For the longest time, they tried to keep cell towers and antennas out. And what that's done is caused the carriers to not work with municipalities anymore, to just go directly to private residents wherever they can get a lease and then try to push that site because they do have a right to build out their network under the Telecom Act of 1996. So communities like yours and like Northeastern Westchester that got together with Cityscape to try to develop master plans is the way to go. And it's not just about control too. Obviously, when the municipality gets together, you're you're deciding where it fits into your community. You're getting the revenue from it. The control also dictates the height of a site, and what it looks like is based on the lease itself. Regardless of whatever zoning approvals you get or any permits you get, the carrier or the real estate developer is going to be limited by what lease entitlements they have. So if the lease entitlements are with the municipality themselves, you're always going to have that ability to determine what the maximum height of this tower is and not approve any extensions of what the look of it is. So that control is often more important than even the revenue from these types of facilities.
So, for example, I've noticed, take the train into the city, you get close to the point at which the train dives into the tunnel past 125th Street, you have buildings that are just packed with cell equipment all around the parapet. Like, packed, dozens of them.
Yeah.
So how does that develop? Is that building essentially rented its parapet to all these carriers?
Exactly. They lease their rooftop much like they would rent a office within that building. And that may be part of the solution for your village. You know, as we look into it more, that may be. You know, this building itself, even though it has antennas on the top, is technically eligible for historic designation. But there's not actually many very tall buildings within the village. And as I was trying to explain with the bit silly light show there, you need to have a certain amount of height in order to be up above those immediate interference issues and then get over. So even a tall
line of
building,
sight, I mean, you can't be behind the parapet, it has to be line of sight?
Yes. This technology is all based on line of sight.
Okay.
So it would need to either poke up above the parapet, or sometimes you'll see them mounted to the sides of the building, and they try their best to, I guess, kind of match the side of the building. It never quite looks right. But yes, that is another way to potentially do it.
So, in our case, it would be about identifying some relatively high places in strategic zones.
Yeah, well, as I've begun to look at the village here, I don't necessarily think you need high places or high towers. What I'd like to do, and the reason I'm presenting to you tonight, is to introduce myself and say that I want to work with you to perform that analysis. And what I would do then is first look at municipal properties, see where they're strategically located, and have analyses done and plots run to see what kind of coverage you would get from different sites at different heights. But I would imagine that the solution can be found with a series of towers that are about 60 to 80 feet in height. So you're not talking another 150-foot tower. Lower sites, lower towers, strategically placed, I think would be the best solution.
And who would, if we identified those spaces and they were found to be both strategically good for the coverage and aesthetically acceptable to that zone of the village, who pays for them? Does the carrier come in and say, great, you guys have said you'll let us do one here, we'll build it?
I would pay for it. I would come to you with a lease, and then I would
very
lease.
nice. Will you pay?
Yes, absolutely. Well, you know, part of this is really working as a partnership in a sense. It's still landlord-tenant, but it is a partnership the way we look at it with the municipality, where I would lease the
Can
ground
I stop
space.
sharing here and then we'll see more of you?
Yeah.
So when you say you'll pay for it, your company is in the business of building towers and then leasing space out.
Correct. We build, own, manage, and maintain the sites completely. There
As
is
compared to an older model where lots of these towers were built and paid for by one carrier and then they lease pieces to other carriers.
Yeah, they don't do that so much anymore.
Yeah.
But they could still do that. You know,
But they're
oftentimes
trying to
they'll do
keep
that
the
on.
capital expense off their balance sheet, or?
Well, that's part of it. They don't want to have that capital hit because, like I said, they're limited as to the amount of funds they use. A lot of times, Verizon may actually even start an application and then they'll assign it away before it gets built for a developer like myself to come in to then build and own the structure. Because these structures, you know, even a small one is going to cost at least $500,000 to complete between the permitting approvals, the construction of the site, and everything else. And that's on the low end.
The 60-foot tower you were describing is $500,000-ish to build?
I would say at least, yeah.
Then
Depending
I
on
know-
where it is.
I mean, we have quite a bit of equipment at the foot of that tower that we have on Castleton Street. Quite a bit of equipment
Mhm.
for each carrier.
Correct.
Is that the case for the shorter units? as
It
well?
would still be the same. Each carrier still needs their own base station equipment. Generally, they fit within a 10 by 20 lease area. In smaller sites, there are clever ways to try to reduce that footprint as much as possible. Nowadays, the carriers aren't using big shelters that look like really trailers coming in anymore. It's generally either a raised metal platform or a concrete pad with what looks like refrigerator type equipment outside. So their footprint has gotten smaller, but each carrier needs their own space.
And so some of these guys also now have backup generators and all that
Yes.
stuff. So just thinking it out as we can think about, where might it be imaginable to have a 60-foot tower? If you imagine, 4 carriers on a tower, 3,
Well, we design it always for 4 carriers plus public safety equipment from a structural perspective.
Okay, so just thinking that out, again, sort of imagining where such a thing could go, that's a 60-foot tower that cannot be shrouded by trees, right? Because that gets in the way.
It would have to be above the tree line,
Yeah.
especially if they're very
And
close.
then
yes.
you've got, hypothetically, 4 fenced areas, each 10 by 20 feet-ish.
Now, it would be one large fenced area with all of the carriers' space within that.
So that might be 40 by 20-ish. I mean, I'm just
Yeah.
very round figures.
Well, yeah, generally, if in an ideal world, if there's plenty of room, I like to lease a 60 by 60 lease area, 3,600 square feet.
Yes.
Depending on the areas, though, it doesn't have to be a square. We can be creative with the shape and
Yeah, so, I
limit
mean,
the carriers.
Obviously, we would welcome your input on this. I will say, I think it's a challenge to find sites that would be acceptable to neighborhoods with that level of equipment.
Yeah.
But there probably are a few.
So yeah.
Well,
if I could
luckily,
just-
that's my job.
Yeah, if I could jump in and conscious of the time. So we've talked we've talked about this matter and thought that tonight wasn't the right time to present the specifics of sites because in their experience they find that that's all we talk about, and so because then you start
Yeah.
to think about all the aesthetics and
Right. Right.
the buildings that surround. But I will say from my perspective, Vincent surprised me with. Especially one, but maybe potentially 2 sites that I definitely had not thought of, and I had been studying the map myself. So your expertise was very much appreciated, and I went to one of those sites today, and I had never even thought about it before.
Well,
So-
and luckily,
so
that's why I
thank-
still
so thank
have
you
a
for
job
that.
and I can still support my family
Yeah.
because
And
this is what I've been doing for 15 years. So the reason I came tonight is really to make
Yeah.
sure that, not just that you understand that you have an issue, but that there is a potential solution. Because what I'd like to do now is provide, an analysis of your community, look at all the properties, and come back to you in the future with a proposal after working, with the members. To come to you with a formal proposal where we can talk more about the specifics of each
And
site.
so, hypothetically, your analysis might identify publicly owned land,
Mhm.
in which case you would lease that from us,
Correct.
hypothetically.
Mhm.
It might also identify privately owned land, in which
Potentially.
case you would propose such a lease with that landowner.
Correct.
And then, in that circumstance, what level of control does the community have? Let's say XYZ property owner says, great, you can have 60 by 60 and put up a 60-foot tower. We're all in favor. What's the approval process for that? Is
Well,
that
depending
a
on the
planning
location, it
commission
would-
site plan approval? Through our
Yes.
planning commission?
Yes, it would. It would have to go through a full.
And what level of influence do they have to say, like it, don't like it, could this be different, all of those things?
Well, when you're on a private property, municipalities are limited by the Telecom Act of '96 in that they can't take certain things into account when making their decisions. The big one being health effects, because the government's reviewed that. That's the only thing that's really taken out of the consideration.
Mhm.
Other than that, you still have setback requirements. You still have all of the other things as if I were to build a house on a private property.
Based on local zoning.
Both based on your local zoning code. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So great. Sounds like
Oh, I'm just curious, what's the argument against putting these on taller buildings?
Nothing. And that may be a solution for you.
just
You
we don't,
don't
have, very
have
many
many.
taller buildings.
Yeah, you don't have many taller
Right, but the
buildings.
fact that we don't have that many still means some are, some are going to be the tallest, right?
One thing that your colleague Manny told me at a previous meeting was that wood frame structures cannot
Yeah.
support these, and so I asked Eric, I said, these are police antennas on Village Hall. Those are 60 to 80 feet. No one even thinks about them. right?
Yeah, they're
But
just
this
slim.
they're slim, right? This
Yeah.
building cannot support the weight, right?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't
Yeah.
even, because, especially any kind of pitched roof.
Yeah.
And the fact that, putting aside that this is actually eligible for historic designation, means I still, besides the approval process I would need to go through for site plan approval, I also need to get under the NEPA, and I have to go through SHPO to get their concurrence that it's not gonna have
Well,
an
it's
adverse
a
effect
tile
on the
roof,
historic
I mean,
property.
whatever. But I mean, these 60-foot towers, what would help, and again, we probably need to move on, and we've taken up enough of your time, all of interest, be worth sending along so all of us get a look at what does a typical installation of the sort you're talking about look like?
Look like, yeah.
Right? How big is the tower? How wide is it? It's not a slim, tiny needle of a thing, right? It's got some dimension to it.
Well, in general, it's really not that much. The tower itself is relatively thin. At the base, you're talking 36 to 40 inches in diameter, and then it tapers up to maybe 24 to 28 inches.
So
The
it's significant. I mean, it's not a needle.
It's not a needle, no. And
Yeah, no,
they can't
I
make
just-
them. We
No,
can't
I
make them
understand.
invisible yet. The bigger thing is actually the antennas that would then get mounted to the outside of it,
Right.
and they would have a diameter of up to 10 feet, 8 to 10 feet.
Right. So, it's just the kind of thing that, I mean, of course, this is your life. You've been doing it for 15 years. Doesn't go over well with folks who will see it from their home.
But as you said in one of our meetings, don't think of the tree on the hutch. when you because that's a very obsolete aesthetic design, and you showed that your company showed different tree models coming out of California or Italy, or obelisk models that are coming out of other places that actually look nice even.
My pet peeve is
So-
the flagpole that's massively fat relative to the
Right.
flag.
Right.
Well, I would definitely discourage anyone from considering flagpoles.
I would too.
The amount of equipment that these carriers need at their rad centers, where their antennas are, is great now. That's why that one looks silly now, because the amount of equipment that had to go into there got increased, so they had to bump it out. But even when you do that, you're still limiting the amount of equipment that can go in there. So that means you have a cell tower that really isn't being maximized to its potential, because you're limiting the number of antennas there. And if you're going to have a cell tower in your community that you're going to see regardless, you might as well make sure it's one that actually does the job.
I agree. Worst thing of all would
Yeah.
be to go through the trouble and have the impact, but not the results. All right, that's great. So we will continue this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you,
Thank you.
Michael, for pushing this
Great.
forward. And
Sure.
we'll keep the discussion going. Here's the last question. As I'm trying to end this, I'm asking another question. If you build this somewhere, are you optimistic that carriers will say, we're on?
Yeah, especially in the village of Pleasantville. Like, I grew up here. Your community
See, that
needs-
seems to be a requirement of ours.
Well, I know everybody. It's easier if you go to places
live
near
here
your
now?
home. I can get home faster to my
Do you
kids
live
now.
here now?
I live in Cortland now.
Okay.
I
well,
grew up in
that-
Osnane.
That could be fixed, right?
Taxes are a little cheaper the higher you go up in the county. Yeah, I lost my train of thought. What was your question?
Imagine what?
Would the carriers
The
say
carriers-
yes?
Oh yeah. First of all, I'm not going to build the tower, even if I have a lease with you, full approvals and permits, unless there's a carrier that I have a sublease with that's ready to go. We
Okay.
don't build towers and just Field of Dreams it and build it and they will come kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
But I am confident I wouldn't be here spending my time to do this if I didn't think that your community needed it and that the carriers would be willing to co-locate on it.
Okay.
We work directly with the carriers. I'm having a meeting tomorrow actually in Verizon's offices to go through all our site opportunities. I'm going to discuss Pleasantville as well. But I am
Right.
confident, yes, that this
Yeah,
is worth
I mean,
your time.
they know they have a problem too.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
So,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Kerry. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good work.
All right. Westchester Power. We're running a little late, but we should do that.
Yes, Nick.
Yes.
Oh, is that on Zoom? I was
Nick,
wondering
I will
where the
promote
person was.
him. Hey, Nick, are you there?
I am here. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Hear me? Doing all right. How are you all?
Fine. So give us the update on community choice segregation in this topsy-turvy world.
Ha. Yes. And I can't see any of you. I'm looking at the stand that the gentleman was just at, but I don't know if you see me or not, but yeah, Westchester Power. We were. I think this is now the third time now in 3 months.
Thank you.
We're coming in front of you to talk about an MOU, and basically we've been thwarted in the last couple of attempts when we've gone out to all municipalities and locked in, or tried to lock in at a price not to exceed when we go out and do a solicitation, or rather for the extension, we were looking to execute with Constellation, the current provider, and due to that market volatility we've been experiencing, actually, we've not been able to lock in when we've set those price targets in the last 2 attempts. So as a consequence, we're having to pause the program starting in July, and customers are going to switch back to Con Edison in the interim period until we can restart, which we're going to target for the fall. So to avoid another miss, third go around, we're going to move away from that extension idea and look into the long-term solicitation phase and change the price not to exceed language actually to a lowest responsible bidder language. So we understand it to be language that's more standard municipal sort of procurement language, and obviously has more flexibility to it than the price not to exceed, and doesn't pose the risk necessarily of the market running away from a ceiling we've set that we can no longer meet, though it doesn't, there's not going to be an arbitrary aspect to that all of a sudden now either. So, just here to talk about that and give you a brief, update on what's been going on, but basically, now residents should have gotten a letter in the mail about the pause that's coming here in July, letting them know basically the general gist of what's going on, what to expect, and going back to Con Edison, and how to get in contact with us and find more resources, and stay informed. So, we're still excuse me, working through the process now vigorously to visit all of the municipalities and get everybody on board for this new MOU so that we can set ourselves up for a fall restart. In the middle of that process right now.
So is there any fear, Nick, that because of the volatility at the moment in energy markets, bidders will be hedging their bets and because of the fear of getting burned in a big way over a long-term contract, come back really higher than they potentially need to?
I don't, necessarily say that. There's certainly going to be, we talk about uncertainty being, I think, in the past priced into the time frame now, and that still exists. So yeah, anybody who's going out for a solicitation, is going to be a little bit conservative because of those unknown factors. Well, really these pressures that have pushed the prices up and don't seem to be going in there. So it's really the light at the end of the tunnel situation for some of these, the geopolitical issues of the war in Ukraine and the continually spiking temperatures out there and unseasonable weathers and all of these blackouts and other things, that could potentially strain supply even more. So there's a lot of things out there that have pushed volatility and markets where they're at now that don't necessarily have an insight in place. So, there's some level of uncertainty with all of that. But again, that's just kind of the lay of the land. Everyone has to deal with that Con Edison.
So, I assume that there's a whole lot less uncertainty in the cost of generating renewable energy, solar, wind, hydro, right? It's just that it all gets pitched into the same pool and everything goes up?
Kind of. So, with the way we procure renewable energy for the program is, and the way that we do, within the New York State market is through renewable energy certificates. So, those are representative certificates of the renewable generation that we're supplying to the program. So that's all underpinned by a general supply that any supplier who contracts with the program provides into the grid for our contracts. But then those who are on the 100% renewable supply, that energy is being matched through these certificates that are bought on through the NIGAS market, the New York State market that tracks all of these. So all of that requisite renewable generation that we need for the program, those suppliers buy that, and that's an added-on cost to the base supply. So right now, until we get to the point where there's more renewables online and increased amount of generation, then that that curve starts to change where renewables become more predominant and fossil fuels less so, that's sort of a premium and additive cost to the way we can represent and provide renewable energy.
So is there a kind of tipping point that people envision there in terms of when the percentage of renewables will start to impact the overall energy market that way?
You know, it's imminent. I mean, it's going to be not next year or the year after, but, you know, with our state goals through the Climate Act, you know, we're talking about substantial amounts of renewable energy representing the makeup of the supply and the market in the not too distant future. So that is going to be aggressively changing on a year-to-year basis, but you know, in the current state of things, it's still highly reliant, you know, from a general supply perspective on natural gas, which is the predominant fuel for electricity.
Okay, so in the best of all possible worlds, the program may be back up and running in the fall, later fall.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what we're shooting for. So we run our solicitation here in the mid part of July. So we're really, you know, in the heat of getting all the municipalities here locked into the MOU. So we're doing a pretty solid job right now, actually, in terms of staying on track for that full solicitation time frame. So yeah, all things being equal and all moving as we planned, that should be definitely an attainable goal for us.
And is there much cause to be concerned that this upheaval back to Con Ed and then the round of letters about the changeover will generate more opt-outs?
We've not seen that to be the case. Letters have been in mailboxes for most people, or have been received by most people well over a week ago, close to 2 weeks. So we had, you know, a higher than usual volume of calls and emails, of course, than day-to-day business, but nobody opting out. Just there's across the whole aggregation of the 24 municipalities. So a couple people who, you know, maybe didn't ever realize they were in the program and were offended by that fact that they were in it without their knowledge. But yeah, mostly it's been pretty positive for people.
Right. I mean, just to be clear, for those people who might be listening, without their knowledge means they just didn't pay attention to the mailings they got. So.
Exactly.
Right. I mean, it's not that they weren't informed and given an opportunity to opt out. That was done, and it was done with pretty substantial clarity. So.
Yeah, they you know, they would have gotten their letter informing them, probably other communications to the municipalities and any groups that are involved in their area.
Yeah. And obviously, there's no guarantee going forward, but for folks who've been in the program from the beginning, especially in this period of volatile energy costs in the last few months, it's been a benefit. In addition to the bigger picture benefits, the local dollars and cents benefit to someone who's been in the program, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, I think over the life of the program, it's been a modest savings as compared to folks who stayed with the default Con Ed supply.
For our standard supply, it's been a modest savings, and then just a negligible tick higher on average for the rate for renewable, which, considering, again, that premium and higher cost for renewable that exists, that's a really impressive.
And further to what we just said a few minutes ago, it's this kind of mechanism that generates increased demand for renewable and thus increased capital investment that ultimately can produce a more stable energy supply and presumably make our energy costs less affected by geopolitical turmoil.
Yeah, and you know, the long-term view of what we're trying to do here, of course, is you know, bring a lot of that development and generation directly into the county, and you know, as we go along in time, a lot of that direct renewable energy generation is those sites are being developed here, and we're directly powering more and more of our communities with that green energy. So yeah, part of the longer-term vision.
All right, so I mean, folks who want to know more can go to sustainablewestchester.org or directly to westchesterpower.org. Either one works, right?
sustainablewestchester.org/WP for the Westchester Power.
Yeah. I just went to westchesterpower.org and it took me to that very page, the Westchester
Oh,
Power
great.
page of
Well, that
sustainable.
works.
So it's still working that way. All right, any other questions from anybody? All right, thank you, Nick, much appreciated. Here's hoping the world stabilizes. Can you make that happen?
Thank you.
All right, have a good night.
You too.
All right, so that ends our work session. I will begin our regular session. Good evening, thank you all. We're returning to work session. We have a couple of items to discuss, one of which is an analysis of the R2A zoning district that we requested from our planning firm BFJ, and then a request from Yosemite Memorial Plaza to extend a license agreement, and then we will head to executive session. So we'll continue the online Zoom for those who are watching for those next two items, and then depart to executive session. Thank you all, and look forward to seeing you all again on Monday, July 11th. Meanwhile, get your tickets to the music festival. All right.
Peter, there was a thing that came up. I don't know if this is a good, should I wait till later in the work session? There was a thing that was raised at the pool over the weekend about the brochure for the camps, for the teen camps in particular.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the mom noticed that there's a requirement for girls that they're only allowed to wear one-piece bathing suits.
Yeah, David
And
had
there was
made mention of that, and we're digging into it. I think that's just, it's been in there since time began.
I figured that it was one of those things that just got
It isn't
left in.
clear that it has any real reason for being. Is that the bottom line?
Yeah, Mike's feedback is it's kind of industry standard, but he does not have any rationale or priority to keep it in there.
Okay.
All right,
'Cause
so
there was
we'll
a bit of an uproar, so.
remove
Okay.
that
Okay.
requirement. So, again, I think it's just a piece of boilerplate that nobody thought to get rid of, and
That's
and
what
we
I
will,
figured.
so. All right, great.
Guys, thank you very much. With your permission, I may depart a little bit early here to try to get ready for my flight.
Understood. You're supposed to be on a flight in mere hours.
Thanks for joining us, David.
Good luck in your flight.
Thank you, guys.
And have a great trip.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Okay. Bernie, I see that you're on there. I know this was a matter of concern to you. Let me make you, there you go, talking permitted if you so choose. So I hope people have an opportunity to look at the 6-page memo that we received from Susan Cavate at BFJ Planning, essentially exploring the questions that had been raised by the subdivision of the former Baker property at 245 Bedford Road on the corner of Clark Street, where a large property was legally subdivided into 3 parcels. One, the parcel that includes the old house, which will remain, and then 2 additional parcels, one on the corner, and then one that would front only on Clark Street, both of which acquire by law the zoning of the parent lot from which they were cleaved. So that generated quite a bit of concern among folks in that neighborhood about the 2-family zoning that was then created on the side street. Former Mayor Bernie Gordon, who I think is on the call now, sent us a memo addressing that same issue and noted, for example, that the Girl Scout building at the corner of Great Oak Lane and Bedford Road presented a similar potential where it could be subdivided and produce potentially 1 or more 2-family lots that front not on Bedford Road but on the side street Great Oak Lane. And he suggested, having been involved way back when in the creation of the overlay district, and I think that modification of the R2A zone, that the intent at the time had been to provide 2-family zoning on properties that fronted Bedford Road, and at the time it didn't anticipate the circumstance that would arise if a larger property got subdivided. So we sent that to Susan Favate and Eric Robert Hughes and I had a preliminary conversation with her, and I can share my screen for those who might be watching. Let me do that. So obviously we can't go through this in detail in this format, but everybody has it, and it's also available to the public as a piece of our agenda. But essentially, the initial part was that BFJ took a look at what the current requirements are for the R2A district, then took a look at the existing R2A district, which follows the line you see here, and analyzed which ones had the potential, based on their size, to produce a zoning compliant subdivision. That turned out to be 4 parcels, numbers 19, 30, 43, and 46. Let me go back to that. So 46 is the Girl Scout building. 19 is the Baker property, which has already been subdivided. And I can report, because we have been authorized to say this, that the owner of the 2 side parcels that were cleaved off the larger piece has agreed to to sell the second parcel in, the one that doesn't front Bedford Road, with a deeded requirement that it be only single family, even though it's in a 2-family zone. Again, that would be unnecessary depending on a change we might make, but that the corner lot, which does front Bedford Road, would remain R2A. So the other 2 lots that they identified are both very large properties that are theoretically subdividable, but would only be subdividable if the big and I think quite valuable houses were torn down. Nonetheless, by BFJ's analysis, there were a potential of 4 properties that would be legally compliant if subdivided. So they've talked about several options. Here you see the drawing of the Girl Scout property with a potential subdividable development. And then identified parcels that could be subdivided for single family development. I don't think that is so much the issue we confront right now. But at any rate, the long story short, we had a conversation after she submitted this, and the sense of this was that in order to address the issue that Bernie and others have presented, it would be possible to establish in our zoning code the requirement that 2-family homes in the R2A district have frontage on Bedford Road. So what that would mean is we don't have to change the zoning map if we enacted such a requirement. It would simply create a circumstance, as would be the case on the Clark Street properties, where the second property in would remain in the R2A zone, but would not be able to achieve the requirement of having frontage on Bedford Road. So it doesn't require changing the zoning map. It doesn't require throwing a whole bunch of other properties into non-compliance because of that. But I think it would achieve the goal that Bernie and others have sought. And it would do it, I think, with relatively little impact, since per the analysis BFJ presented, there are only a very small number of properties potentially at risk for this problem. And obviously the Girl Scout property is one of them. So, Bernie, did you want to comment in any way on that? You can talk if you wish. All right. Don't know if he's going to watch or whether he's muted. Did anybody else have a view on this? Dead silence.
I mean, well, you presented some new information there, I guess.
Yeah, I think
with
we're
Clark Street, so that was new.
absorbing.
Yeah, although the situation at Clark Street, where the current owner has agreed, at least verbally and pretty clearly, that he will make certain that the second parcel in is sold with the deed requirement in perpetuity to be single family, that addresses that problem. But that problem, to the extent that you perceive it to be a problem, would be also addressed by this proposed change, which is to say, at least in the R2A zone, the clear intent, as Bernie has described, and as you can see in outline of the R2A zone, which follows the property lines all along Bedford Road,
Mhm.
would mean that that second parcel would not need that deeded easement, because it would, that deed restriction, I mean, that, because it would be unable to achieve the requirement that there be frontage on Bedford Road. Clearly, you'd have to have some minimum width requirement so that somebody could,
Right.
create a plot that had a 1 foot finger that reached out to Bedford Road, but
But that would only be true if we change the zoning prior to the sale of that lot with Clark frontage.
that would be true.
Okay.
But as I say, I think, obviously it ain't over till it's over, but I think we can trust the owner who has both said he will do that and has said that we can publicly say so. So I think it unlikely that there is a risk attached to that. By the same token, to my knowledge, it hasn't sold yet, so.
So since I was absent for the original meeting, the concern that is raised is about the density of having two-family homes.
Right, so you can, Bernie also sent a memo that we all got a few
Yeah.
weeks back.
Yeah.
And,
I saw that.
the core argument there is that the density and activity associated with two-family houses inserted into a neighborhood that's otherwise single-family would be problematic. That matter is obviously, not viewed the same way by everybody.
Yeah.
But I will say that the one piece of this that seems pretty clear is that there are only 4 parcels in total where this is a possibility at all. And the one of them has already been attended to, as mentioned, the Baker property. 2 of them seem highly, highly, highly unlikely ever to be subdivided in that way, because you'd have to knock down an old and very valuable house. So really what it adds up to is the issue exists at the Girl Scout building. What we don't know at the moment is what may happen at the Girl Scout building. As you know, it was offered for sale. It was in contract to a developer who was intending to build single-family homes. That developer decided not to carry through with the deal. I don't know all of the details, other than the conversation I had with him suggested that he may have been over-optimistic about the number of single-family lots that were going to be possible on that property. I don't know if that was in the end the result, but anyway, it's back on the market, and I can report that we've had interest expressed by various entities, including some not-for-profits, that might potentially fulfill the requirements of the special use permit based on our zoning code, but all of that is unknown. So we don't know what will happen there, but if we were simply to add the requirement that the R2A zone requires frontage of a minimum width to be determined on Bedford Road, that would address what some perceive as a risk on the Girl Scout building, and I think it's a pretty straightforward solution that is really relatively unimpactful anywhere else.
That's how it looks to me as well. And there aren't, the other 2 don't have any side street frontage anyway.
Correct. Right. So, look, there's obviously going to be a whole lot of discussion, and has been in the past year, and certainly in the coming years, about accessory dwelling units, about multifamily housing, about changes in local zoning to increase the availability of both of those things, including, as has been suggested in Albany already, overriding local zoning at the state level to require those things. I think our community deserves quite a bit of credit for having created and being in the process now of creating quite a bit of multifamily housing. We are certainly not a community that has sort of put up a fence around it and said we only want single-family homes. To the contrary, the increase in the number of housing units in Pleasantville, not just now, but in really years past, with the creation of apartment projects like Ledge Rock, like the apartments on Broadway and Pleasantville Gardens on Manville, have all created an environment where we have a lot of multifamily housing. The new work that's going on downtown is creating more of it. And obviously it's a fragile business and one that is hard to predict since we don't control the market, to both protect and maintain stable neighborhoods that in many cases exist almost unchanged for the last 75 or more years, but at the same time accommodate change in the world. So I don't think this modest change in our R2A zoning would be an indication that we're contrarians about multifamily housing, but I do think it would address the concerns that we've heard from lots of neighbors, and I think it would also reduce modestly our exposure to problematic development at the Girl Scout building. So
Well, that seems good, the latter.
that would be good.
Yeah.
So, Paul, you have any thoughts on that? Seem okay?
Yeah, I think that it kind of creates, like we said,
Yeah.
a good precedent kind of moving
Yeah.
forward on it, where we're not changing the whole thing, and it just kind of seems to work out in that way. There was a good
Yeah.
solution to it.
All right. So, Bernie, are you there? If you want to talk, feel free to unmute. The other piece of this, and you can go back to the memo and see that, is that Susan has identified, and I think is something that we've noticed at various points in the past, that the text of the historic overlay district, which was created back in the mid to later 80s in response to the loss of a big Victorian house and the creation of the office building at 427 Bedford Road, is kind of a statement of faith. It's a little bit loosey-goosey.
Loosey-goosey, yeah.
And Susan has suggested that it would make sense to undertake, as a separate matter from this zoning change I just mentioned, a more thorough review of that, and to suggest some strengthened language in that code that would give the ARB and Planning Commission, both functioning, the same group functioning as both boards, would give them both clearer tools to use to address applications that come before them, and also clearer regulations to enforce. Again, nobody's talking about some extraordinarily Dacronian, colonial Williamsburg kind of a rule with a list of paint colors.
Paint colors.
But by the same token, we are the fortunate beneficiaries of a street that, to a large extent, not entirely, but to a large extent, looks very much the way it looked 100 years ago, and that's a significant piece of the historic character of the community, the charm of the community, and its history. So I would be in favor of engaging BFJ to do that review. Susan said she could give us a proposal. Obviously, there's an additional fee attached to that. But let's get a look at what that might cost and what steps she might take. Feel
That
right?
sounds like a good idea.
All right. So can I take from the action there that, pending on any further comment that might come in the coming days, we should ask BFJ to put together the steps required to enact this change in the R2A zone, adding the requirement that any property in the R2A zone has to have frontage on Bedford Road of some minimum width, and she should suggest to us what she thinks that should be in order to qualify for two-family zoning. So just to be clear, what that would mean is there would be the potential, as there is now would then be on the second lot in on the Baker property on Clark Street, to have properties in the R2A two-family zone that are only developable as single family because they don't meet that requirement. We asked, but it's clear from both planning and legal that you can't have contingent zoning that says the underlying zoning changes automatically if you subdivide and no longer have Bedford Road frontage. So it would require a map change every time that happened. So this seems like a pretty straightforward, clean route. in the hypothetical that the Girl Scout building were to be purchased by someone who intends to use it for a permitted use with no changes, it would be a moot point, but in place nonetheless. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
70 Memorial
70
Plaza.
Memorial. Eric, do you want to describe that?
Oh yeah. Hold on. So we have 3 existing license agreements that are set to expire. One over the parking spaces at Memorial Plaza, one over a portion of the lane lot, and one over a portion of Cooley Street, both of which are being used for staging areas. They're requesting a month-to-month, not to exceed 6 months. They pay every month for the parking that they are using. The parking spaces here on Memorial Plaza, they are probably within the next month or so going to be able to provide back to us. So
And then we
start
can
work on-
enact the angled parking.
Correct. So that we still have to come to terms on in terms of whether to just make it a straight sidewalk or one with bump outs. But that is the request that they have right now. So it would be not to exceed 6 months, but they'd be agreeable to month over that period of time.
The building looks like it's moving along pretty quickly. Is there any more accurate estimate about when it's likely to be done?
Not that I've received.
I met with them a few weeks ago, and they said they were targeting to be done the end of the year. I have to say that seems aggressive, but as you rightly point out, they're moving fast.
Fast, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it's really, as you can see with your own 2 eyes, it's a level of quality that's impressive. So,
Mm-hmm.
all right, so I'm fine with the extension.
Okay. And then we maybe for the next work session revisit the sidewalk area.
Yeah, good
Right.
idea.
So there, Vito is interested in providing planters that
Mhm.
would be irrigated from within the building,
Mm,
which would be
Interesting.
great.
yeah.
So, his landscape architect is going to come back with a proposal for that, right?
Right.
That sounds good.
All right. Anything else on that before we go back to executive session?
That's it.
All right. We're Bernie had audio issues. Did you want to say something, Bernie? Are you able to?
Maybe not.
All right. Well, I'll give him a buzz tomorrow just to
Yeah, good
Just to
idea.
make sure. All right, I'm going to end the Zoom. And then head to the back. Before I do that, I'm going to respond to Owl's request to update itself.